I have been so excited for this interview that you're about to hear because when the pandemic hit, my first thought was going out to the teachers who no longer could teach in person. And then as time went on, the ones who are, weeks away from school starting, didn't know what they were doing, and every state's so different. So I was really excited to be able to interview a teacher. So this episode not only talks to a teacher, but it also, the same mom who is a teacher also went from being a teacher to a stay-at-home mom for a few years while her son was little, and then back into the workforce. So I loved hearing her experience with that, from going from stay-at-home mom back to working mom, and then also just how she's dealt with the pandemic, especially because she teaches kindergarten. I can't even imagine how hard that would be. So it's so awesome to hear her experience with the pandemic as a kindergarten teacher. Glue. It's messy, it's sticky, it gets everywhere, but it's also really useful. Just like the glue that we need to put together the pieces of our life as busy working moms. We have after-school activities, we have homework, we have cleaning, we have laundry, and, we want to spend time with our kids as well in the process, and maybe even have some time for ourselves. This podcast is for the busy moms out there who are balancing work, life, and everything in between, and we all know that in between encompasses a lot of things. If you're a mom who wants to do the best in all areas of life, but still have time for yourself, this podcast is for you. I love to interview other moms and find out what works for them, get ideas from them, get inspired by them, and learn, we're all in this together. But I also like to share my own tips, tricks, struggles, triumphs, and share it all with you. So grab a load of laundry, lock yourself in the bathroom, go for a walk, do whatever you got to do, but I am just so glad you're here. Hey, Glue Sticks. It is no secret that I love these working mom spotlight interviews. I love talking to other working moms. I just think giving my presence and my voice to others to share, I absolutely love it. And I love the conversations and the insight and advice and inspiration that's gained. So just like every other woman I've interviewed so far, today is no different. You are in for a real treat. Many of you may already know this person that I'm interviewing today. Her name is Jessica. A lot of you may know her as Kindercrafty, either on Instagram or YouTube. She's kind of a OG of the YouTube world for those of us who've been, watching moms on YouTube for a long time. As you will hear in our interview, she taught kindergarten for quite a few years before getting married and becoming a mom. And then she stayed at home for a few years while her son was little and then jumped back into the workforce. She has such an amazing story of how that happened, which was totally, in my opinion, just like a divine intervention, if you will. And she is such a bubbly, warm personality. She's so sweet and giving, and I just love talking to her from a mom's perspective about what it's like to be a kindergarten teacher. It just really helped me empathize even more with the teachers out there. And I loved hearing her experience of going back into the workforce after staying home for quite a while. And then also her experience of being a teacher during the pandemic. She teaches kindergarten, which I can't even imagine. I think the pandemic would be hard for any age, but I think especially those little ones, their teachers, my heart goes out. So I really hope you guys enjoy this episode. She has so many great things to share. She's such a light. You will hear in her voice. She's just such an upbeat person. And I loved talking to her, and I'm sure you will love hearing her story and gaining some inspiration and wisdom from her as well. Hi, Jessica. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you and to get to talk to you face to face online. It's just really cool. I love these conversations with other moms. So I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy weekend to sit here and kind of chat with us a little bit. So before we jump in, I'm sure some of my audience knows of you as Kindercrafty on Instagram and YouTube, but for those of us that don't know of you, can you just share a little bit about, who you are, your family, and what you do?
Yes, my name is Jessica. I was a kindergarten teacher for 15 years, and then I met my husband, and we got married when I was 38. we decided to have a family. We were fortunately enough that I was able to get pregnant right away. And we had our lovely little boy 9.5 years ago. And we knew when we got married that my goal was to be a stay-at-home mom when he was little, because my degree is I have a specialized degree in early childhood education, so the teaching of very young children. And so why would I then go take that gift that God gave me and use it on other children and not be at home with my own child? So we always knew that those years would be, one income, but it was our choice. And I was lucky enough to do it. And we sacrificed. We made those financial cuts that we needed to make in order for me to do that. And then we always kind of knew that once he was old enough and in school, because I'm a teacher, it's kind of like the perfect job for being a mom, right? That I would go back. But I wasn't really like actively looking for a job because we didn't at the time really quote unquote need it.
Sure.
Financially, it would have been more of just a decision that I wanted to do for me. And so, it just kind of, it kind of fell into my lap, I guess, to go back into teaching. So I taught kindergarten for years and years and years, got married, had my little boy, stay-at-home mom. And then when he went off to kindergarten, I had him in a half-day preschool program just because I wanted to have that time with him in the afternoons at home. And then when he went to kindergarten and he was gone all day, that's when I really realized I want to do something more than just, for me, the cooking and the cleaning of the house was wonderful and rewarding, but I kept feeling like God gave me a gift to teach young children, and I loved it. And I think that's why he did give me that gift, right? And there always felt like something of my day was missing when my husband was at work and my little boy was at kindergarten all day, and I was just at home. So I did take advantage of that year to welcome my girlfriends into my home. It's really funny because one of my girlfriends, when she tells her husband that she's coming to hang out with me, he says, "Oh, you're going for therapy at Jessica's house? It's your mommy therapy." She's like, "It literally is." She said, I tell my husband, I go in and there's like a candle lit and yummy coffee. And she gives me like homemade treats on like a real plate. And so I took that year that my husband was at work, my little boy was gone all day, to really, not minister so much, because some of my girlfriends were not Christian women, but I just opened up my home to those relationships that when you're a mom, you're too busy to actually like sit face to face sometimes and like have just a woman to woman conversation. And I was in some church groups and things that I just didn't have time for before. And so I did a lot with that year, but there was just this nagging thing that just kept saying, you should be teaching young children. And so after that year, we decided that we wanted to look into another school option for my son. He was in a private school, which was our choice. I taught in public school down here in Florida for years. But we knew when we had our own child, if we could afford to financially, we wanted him in a private school. And our son happens to be very gifted academically. So he was in a wonderful private school for kindergarten, but he wasn't being challenged academically at all. Okay. And so we kind of felt like, wow, we're spending a lot of money for him not really to be getting a whole lot other than just the social aspect of kindergarten out of it. So we wanted to look into other options. And there was a school that I had looked at beforehand that my husband ruled out. He's like, it's too expensive. No way. We're not sending our kid to school there. And I said, babe, there's just this feeling when you come on this campus that I can't explain. I've been at schools that had much fancier buildings. I've been at schools where the kids, looked a certain way. But there's a feeling when you walk on this campus, and I can't explain it unless you go on it. And so after Gabriel finished that kindergarten year, I said, I really want you to go look at the school with me. And my husband's question to me was, if you were to go back and teach, would you teach at that school? And I said, I would be honored to teach at that school. So he said, all right, then let's go look at it. So we went and we toured, and I'm asking the questions that only a mom that's been a teacher
right
probably ask, right? I sounded a little bit like a teacher. And towards the end, my husband just casually slides in there. Oh yeah, my wife was an award-winning teacher down in Florida. And she says to me, you were a teacher? And I said, oh yeah. And she said, are you looking to teach again? And I said, well, eventually, that's always been my plan. I'm not actively seeking a job right now,
right.
but if the opportunity came along at the right school, my son's always my number one priority. So it would have to be the best place for him. And she said, would you want to send me your resume?
Wow.
It had been years, Sarah.
Yeah, that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you is getting back into it.
So I run home. I'm like, where in the world is my resume? I'm searching files. Man. So we get the resume together. I send it off. Within 24 hours, she calls me and says, will you please come in for an interview?
Wow.
And I said, sure. I didn't even know what I was interviewing for, Sarah. So we go weeks before school is getting ready to start, looking for a place for my son. I end up sending my resume in. She calls me in within 24 hours. I sit down, not even knowing what I'm interviewing for.
Right.
Interviewed for an hour. They call the headmaster. So our school is a split campus. So there's the lower division and the upper division. There is a division director for lower school, middle school, upper school. And then there's the headmaster. Okay. They call the headmaster to come over from across the street. So I had already interviewed for an hour. He comes over and asks me all the questions that they hadn't asked me, but they're grinning and smiling. And when you're like, okay, this is kind of a good fit that's going on here. And they said, how would you feel about teaching second grade? And I said, well, I've never taught second grade, but I'm not opposed to doing it.
Right.
And they said, how about math and science? And I was like, oh, sure. I teach math and science, which is definitely, I do love science. Math is not my forte. But this school, they compartmentalize teach, and then they switch, right? So there is a teacher who teaches language arts, and there's a teacher who teaches math and science in after first grade and up, right?
Okay. Wow.
And so I had to teach math and science all day. But I was like, I can do this. And so then I said, if I teach here, do I get a tuition break? Right. And they said, absolutely. You get a 50% reduction.
Wow.
And it was amazing. Like, done deal.
Wow.
So within less than a week, I was hired. I went to look at the school for my son and was hired. And that was God all over that. He was like, you need to go back to teach.
Right.
There isn't a kindergarten position available, but there is the second grade one. So let's get you in there, get your son in a school that is perfect for him.
Oh my gosh.
But they don't just do academics, right? The kids have to play an instrument and do a sport as well.
Wow. That's amazing.
So it was a God moment. He was all over that. That was him putting me where I needed to be. And then I quickly realized, I don't want to teach second grade math and science.
So how long did you do that for?
A year. Okay, and I went to my principal. She and I were she actually, the division director, the lower division director, she was new to the school the same year. And she said, I just knew when I met you that there was a really good connection that you and I would work together one day. And so I went to her and I had a really good rapport with her. And I said, listen, I am so grateful that I'm teaching second grade. I said, but I taught kindergarten for so many years that I know that's where my love is. And if something opens up at our school, they call it SK, senior kindergarten, or JK, junior kindergarten. And I'll tell you the difference later. Sure. If an opportunity opens up, I'd like to be considered for it. And she said, well, actually, The teacher that's teaching JK right now just told me yesterday that she's pregnant and won't be returning.
Oh my, you send some of that good vibes
And
over here.
so I
That's
said,
amazing.
she said, would you be interested? I said, sign me up.
Oh
I could
man.
go tomorrow. I've got a
Yeah.
whole garage. I got a garage full of stuff.
Oh
Load me
man.
up. I'm going. And so then the next year, I mean, this is year 2 of me going back into the workforce as a working mom. I had my son at a perfect school. It was a small private school, small classes. And I was teaching the grade level that I wanted to teach. And so that brings me up to today.
Wow.
I know. Can you
Oh my
believe that?
goodness.
What a story,
What a
huh?
story. Yeah.
Mhm.
I had no idea. Yeah, I had all these questions I wanted to ask you about. How was it getting back into the workforce? Was
Mhm.
it hard? Did they look at
Yes.
the gap of employment? Yeah, talk about a little bit about that, about jumping back in and having that year of like kind of filling your own cup for once after becoming a mom and now
Mhm.
kind of giving that up in a sense, but to fill yourself in another way, I guess I
Yes.
could say. How was that?
So that first year was rough. And I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was really hard because because you followed me on
Yeah,
YouTube and Instagram, that I took such pride in the way that I was a homemaker.
for sure.
And
Yeah.
my family got used to me making homemade bread and that was the norm. My home beautifully decorated and
Mhm.
changing all the decor with the seasons and not a speck of dust anywhere.
Yeah.
To me now,
Right.
being a
That's not my
working
house.
mom, and I was so overwhelmed with being a working mom,
Yep.
teaching a new grade level that I'd never taught,
Right.
teaching a content that was not what I felt like was my area of expertise. Other people would say when they came into my classroom that I did a good job, but
Right.
I didn't
Your
feel that
heart
was my
wasn't
Mhm.
fully in it. Yeah.
Um, and there was a lot of changes that had to be made that first year. And because of how quickly everything happened, I didn't have a whole lot of time to like think about or prepare for this
Right.
huge life
Right. Yeah,
transition,
for
right?
sure.
So it evolved over that year. And then I would say last year, my second year, starting that year, is where I really felt like, okay, I'm kind of in this groove of what it looks like for me and my family to be a working mom. There will not be a homemade dinner every night of the week. There
Right.
won't. And that was hard for me to give up because I
Yeah.
was good at it. I like cooking. I was good at it. My boys enjoyed my cooking. And that was hard for me to be like, yep, frozen pizza every Friday. Count on
Yep.
it. Right.
Yep.
Um, that was hard for me. That year, when that first year I was teaching second grade, we got a cleaning lady once a month. First time ever I ever had anyone else touch my home. And that was hard for me. That was a little bit of a
Yeah.
pride thing that I couldn't keep up with it.
Yeah.
Um, now that I'm back teaching the grade level that I love, and it's all new. I can do that stuff again,
Sure.
and I put those
Sure.
systems into place. But that was something that I had to. That was a bit of a pride thing that I had to swallow a little bit. That I literally couldn't do it all on my own, and
Right.
I had to ask my
Yeah.
husband for help with like what used to be my domain. Like you know how you and your husband
Right.
both have like your areas
Sure.
of being a family, a couple, that you're good at that you take on, right?
Yep.
Of me having to say all this stuff that used to be mine in my domain, I need help. I need you to
Yep.
do some of it with me. And that was hard for him too, because he was
Yeah.
used to, she's awesome at this. That's all her.
Right.
I do this. And I'm saying, I'm floundering here. I need help. So that was another thing that was hard for me to have to say, I know you've got all of this domain that you do for our family, and I still need you to help with some of the stuff that used to be mine.
Right.
That was hard too. It was hard to let somebody in my home to clean, and it was hard for me to ask my husband to do even like easy things like empty the dishwasher.
Right.
But he didn't ever have to before because I like to be organized. I took on all
Right.
that myself. He never had to think. That was one of those things just off of his
Right.
radar. He never had to think about. So those were some things right off the bat. The not cooking a homemade meal every night, the letting the cleaning lady clean once a week or once a month, and asking my husband for help with things that were in my domain, as far as like chores.
Right.
That was those 3 things stood out to me to be the hardest,
Yeah. And
as far as going back.
I think it's great that you point out that you weren't able to do it all. Like
Mm-mm.
you maybe could have, but your whole family and yourself would have suffered.
Right.
Because I think, especially in today's social media world, people like to portray like I'm doing it all and I'm doing it perfectly, and so many of us aren't and can't live up to that, or just don't want to. We don't want to do it all because then maybe we're not spending time in those relationships. Was it hard for your son, you going back, would you say? Or
He actually loved it because
okay.
honestly, that I could literally look out of my window of my classroom and see his classroom.
Oh,
I could
cute.
see him on the playground.
That's
So
so
for
cute.
him, mom was literally like right there. It's a very
Right.
small school.
Yeah, that's
So
awesome.
he knew if he ever needed me, I was 2 doors down, right?
Right.
So, for him, he didn't notice it so much as far as like he and I, or like his daily going to school and that kind of stuff, because we went to school at the same time, we came home at the same time.
Right.
But he may have noticed a little bit of the tension that I can't do everything anymore. And I was frustrated. The bathroom is dirty and I'm so exhausted. I don't have time to do it. I think he
Right.
may have noticed some of that. But, as a mom, I try to shelter him as much as I can. But
Right.
of course, there's those sighs when you're like, I wish somebody would unload this dishwasher for me.
Right.
That I'm sure those little things that he could have picked up on. But no, I think
Right.
he was pretty cool with having his mom with him. I mean, I volunteered a ton at every school he was ever at. I subbed at his
Right.
preschool, so that wasn't that much of a change for him.
Okay. And so you had your first year back as a kindergarten teacher. That was 2019 to 2020. And so then, as we all know, 2020 comes along and you're finally in your groove and COVID hits.
Yeah.
Why don't you walk us through, maybe share what the difference between junior kindergarten and was it
Yes.
senior kindergarten?
Mhm, mhm.
What the difference of that is and how you transitioned, how your school transitioned, and maybe how it's just been going since then.
Yes. Okay, so the difference between junior kindergarten and senior kindergarten is that I am in a independent private school, and it is a prep academy.
Okay.
So I would say, in my experience, having taught so many years in public school, that this school academically is about a full year ahead of what it
Okay.
is in regular, public school.
Okay.
So junior kindergarten is 4 and 5-year-olds. So we would think pre-K, or in Florida, it would be called VPK, voluntary
Okay.
pre-K. But it is junior kindergarten because I teach a kindergarten curriculum to 4 and
Okay.
5-year-olds. So
Okay.
almost all my kids are already reading. And
Wow, that's
yeah,
amazing.
and so when I say they're like a year ahead, developmentally, they're still 4 and 5s. So
Sure.
in the afternoons, I still have those developmentally appropriate centers. So they still have dramatic play, and they still
Okay.
have blocks, and they still have some of those things. So I'm teaching it at a slower pace than
Okay.
you would, 5 and 6-year-olds in a
Right.
regular kindergarten. So
Sure.
think of it as kind of like how kindergarten used to be, right? Where it
Right.
was like academics in the morning and free toy
Right.
centers in the afternoon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they're full on reading and writing and all of that. But we don't have, number one, the expectation of having to
Right.
have them be at a certain markers because it's still considered,
Sure.
pre-K in a
Right.
sense. Other people would think
Yeah.
of it as pre-K. I know it's junior kindergarten because they're learning how to read, and I'm
Right.
teaching a kindergarten curriculum. But I do vacillate between preschool and kindergarten stuff when I'm researching lessons.
Sure.
I have to research kind of both because developmentally they're still young, but
Right.
academically they're a little bit more mature. So
Okay.
it's a kind of a combination of a little bit of both. So that explains the difference between JK and SK. Now, let's take it back to last March. So
Yes.
I'm swimming along, loving life, back with the littles,
Gosh.
so creative. I have such a great group. I had like 10 little kiddos. My assistant is lovely. It was just, things were good. Things were good. I was a working mom, I was kind of into a routine. We got this, right? And then literally, I think on the Thursday, my head of school calls an all school meeting and says, listen, by tomorrow, you have 24 hours. You have to submit 2-week lesson plan to your division director. So
Oh
I'm
my
like,
goodness.
just let the kids play.
Right. Well, yeah.
I gotta figure this out. So I came up with 2-week lesson plan. And then they said on Friday, which was, I think, the Friday before St. Patrick's Day last year, the 13th,
Yeah.
I think, March
Sounds
13th.
about right. Yeah.
We were told to take 2 weeks worth of supplies home with us, that we would not be admitted back into the school for 2 weeks. Because remember that
2
whole
weeks.
2 weeks
Yep.
to not spread it. So, so I took home 2 weeks worth of supplies, and that's it. And so that's when, honestly, my YouTube channel kind of came back to life
Yeah.
because it was I didn't do anything for years, right? So I did it when my son was little. It was a creative outlet. I could show mommies things that I was already doing at home with him, give tips and tricks. And then when he got old enough where he wasn't in that like pre-K kindergarten age,
Right.
I just kind of didn't do it anymore because
Right.
I wasn't teaching young children and I didn't have a child of my own at home. And I guess I could have changed my YouTube channel a little bit if I wanted to gear it more towards like homemaking.
Sure.
But the title of my channel was Kindercrafty.
Right. Right.
So I just let it lie. And then last year, when they said, all right, you're going to have to do this, I thought, wait a minute. I can make a video every day and put it on a platform that we used at our school called Seesaw.
Yep. That's what we used.
I'll put it on Seesaw, and then I can upload it to YouTube and share it for free. I didn't monetize them. Share it for free with all the mommies out there. And it took off.
That's
Moms were like,
amazing.
isn't that crazy
It
how that
is.
happened?
Yeah.
Now I'm using Zoom as my e-learning platform. I only have 3 kiddos that are learning virtually, and I have 12 kids on campus. So now we use Zoom, and I'm not putting them on YouTube anymore, but I really enjoyed getting back into
that's awesome.
doing that. I did a video every single day and uploaded
That's
it.
crazy.
And
was your son home with you then during that time? And how did that go for you?
So he was in 2nd grade, and just because he's a pretty mature kid and I've taught him to be really pretty independent, I just assumed he would know what to do. I can do my thing. He can do his thing. And then in the afternoon, after I was done filming and doing whatever I needed to do, answering questions from parents, I'd be available to help him.
Okay.
And that didn't happen. He needed a lot more help than I thought he did.
Oh, okay.
He's bright and he can do the work academically, but he never submitted stuff to his teacher virtually before. He didn't know how to do it. And there were some things that they were asking them to do, like paper and pencil, but then they would have to take a picture and then submit.
Sure. Yeah.
And he didn't know how to do all that. Now it's like old hat. He can do all of it. But at the time, I quickly realized, oh, okay, I have to restructure how this is going to look. So I would, when he was on his first Zoom, I would run and film. Then when he got
Okay.
off, I would do a quick check-in. Do you know what your assignment is? Do you know how to do it? Do you know how to submit it? Yes, mommy, I do. Or no, mommy, I need your help. And then that would happen. And then
Okay.
I would edit a little bit. So I would do a little bit of editing. And
Sure.
while he's on his next Zoom, then another check-in. So it was kind of a back and forth. It would take me
Okay.
like all day to film and edit
Sure.
and get it up on Seesaw. And I always, to my parents, would send like a supply list the day before. Like I take a snapshot and say, okay, tomorrow they're going to need paper, crayons, whatever, magnet
Right.
letters, a cookie sheet, whatever they needed.
Right.
And so that they were prepared. And then I would drop it in their Seesaw inbox every morning at 8:00. And then I was ready. I would start over again. So
Sure.
that's how I made it work last year. It looks very different this year.
Okay.
But that worked for me because I already had that YouTube background. So I already knew how to do that and how to capture their attention because, with littles, you're going to lose them unless you are super engaging and have props. And I would change like my color every day. And I would say, what's our signing color today? And I was like, look at my shirt. And I give them like a little clue.
That's so cute.
And I would have them do things like they really felt like I was talking to them, even though I was on video. Like some of the mommies would say, because I would say things like, wait, what? Say it louder. I can't hear you. I'd cup my hand to my ear. And I'd be like, "Oh yeah, I heard you, Ava. I heard what you said." And said they would literally thought I was talking to them, and I'd be like, "Oh, Deacon, give me a drum roll on that." And the mom would say, "They're literally like doing
so cute."
Yeah, so that's what I did to be engaging, and I felt like with a video that the parents could do school anytime it worked for them because they were being thrown into this new world of, oh my gosh, I have to work from home and I've got my kids at home and how am I going to teach them? So they knew that the video was going to be in their inbox every morning at 8, but they could do school whenever they wanted to.
Okay, good.
It's different now, but that's how I made it work last year in 2020. And it worked for us.
How hard was it? I know I taught middle school English for a while, which is way different than kindergarten, and having a kindergartner myself and teaching, preschoolers, not elementary, but preschool age in my daycare, I know how much they need stuff in their hands and they can't just be doing worksheets and stuff all the time. Mm-hmm. How hard was that for you to adapt it, to actually come up with the lessons and things that you would have to do virtually with just stuff that they would already have, or to adapt it from what you would do in the classroom, maybe with like your arsenal of stuff? How hard was that to translate it to, a whole different environment in a really short amount of time?
It was hard. And I had to use things that I knew that they already had at home because like when I told you that we had literally like 24 hours to think about what we were going to do for the next 2 weeks and to only take home 2 weeks worth of stuff. Insane. I didn't have in my house anymore. I didn't have Play-Doh. My son was 8.5. He didn't really play with Play-Doh anymore. I didn't have paint. My son is not, he's more like into like science and that kind of stuff.
Right.
He's not a really arts and crafts kind of kid. So I had like nice paints. Like I love to watercolor on my own time, but I didn't have like kid craft paint.
Right.
So a lot of the times part of my video lessons were teaching the parents what they could use as alternatives. And I would even say in there, you can count with Cheerios. You can count with pennies. You can count with Legos. You can count Barbie shoes. You can use whatever you have around your house to count. Okay, so here's what you're going to do.
You're so creative.
Go grab a handful. And honestly, Sarah, because I am so creative, that's what I missed about not being in the classroom when my husband was working full time and my son was at school.
Right.
I missed that creative outlet. And when I was teaching second grade math and science, I missed the creative part of it. Yeah. And I honestly, I think that's a gift that I was given, and it's not something that I have to work at. It's something that fuels me. So when I come up with these creative ideas that some people, you put it on Instagram and some people may think, oh yeah, she's trying to show off. Look at her.
Right. No.
To me, it fuels me. Like I get
Right.
excited about it. You can see like the smile on my face, the
Sure.
energy in my body. It gives me something to be that creative. I come from a very creative mom. My dad is a dentist, but that's somewhat creative because they have to make your teeth pretty, right?
Yeah.
But my mom was an artist. She was an art teacher.
Okay.
And I grew up, she had a huge art studio that was over like a 3-car garage and it had windows on 3 floors. And we had access to any and all of that stuff.
That's
amazing. I grew up, being really creative. She also had like a microphone, like back in the 70s, she had a microphone that she would plug into our huge like stereo. And me and my siblings would we were like Donna Summers. We were like putting on the shows. So I was raised, they really supported me being creative, which made it easy as a creative person to then just do that. And my husband's super creative too. He was an art and computer science major. He's got both. Wow. So he's got a fine arts background. So, so of course he is always very supportive of me doing anything. Yeah. Super creative.
That's so cool. Yeah. And just hearing you talk, and I know following you over the years, like I feel like especially kindergarten teachers have something special that most of the population just doesn't have. I taught, I cared at my daycare, but I would say I loved them and I poured into them, but it was hard for me. Not that teaching kindergarten isn't ever hard for you. I'm sure there still are moments, but like just thinking of my daughter's kindergarten teacher and how she transitioned to she still makes each child feel so loved. And I don't think I realized that till my oldest was in kindergarten of how much love they need, like how important. I mean, the academics are great and the socialization is great, but having a teacher who makes them each individually feel so loved. I mean, I cried at our conference just hearing her gush about her, and I am sure she talks that way to each parent. Do you want to talk a little bit about that part of it and how, like, is that hard to pour so much of yourself into each child, or is that something kind of like your creativity that fuels you?
I think it's just part of my gift. I think that's why I teach early childhood. Yeah. It's the grade level that I love. I just love that age, that 4, 5, 6-year-old age. It's just my favorite. They're old enough to be able to follow instruction, but they're little enough that they still want to hold your hand. Right. And they still want you to play with them. Miss Jessica, will you sit and play blocks with me? Sure, let's build this huge train set all the way around the whole classroom. It's not hard for me. Now, you get a little stinker every year. Yeah. Every class has a little stinker. And those are sometimes hard to love in their moments. Right. But you still love the kid, Right. That when they're having one of those temper tantrums or they've just, clobbered a kid over the head with a block, that you're like, you're a little hard for me to love right in this moment. Right. But it's not hard to give them their own little spotlight. In fact, just yesterday, we published our first writing piece. And what that means in my classroom is we take a piece of colored construction paper and we fold it in half and we put their best work that they have chosen from the month of February in and we staple it. And then they get to decorate the front cover. And they've published their first book. So cute. Then we have the author's chair, which means I put a chair next to me and they get to read their writing piece to the whole class. And we all applaud them and we give them a compliment. Adorable. On the writing. So that's just one of those things that is built in. Right. That gives them that moment. And there was a little girl who did not want to share. And I knew she did such an amazing job, but she was shy. I kind of coaxed her through it, got her through that moment, and she was beaming when she did it. So now I know at the end of March, she'll be more comfortable. She'll know what that looks like. What does that look like? What does it look like to publish? It means we put a fancy cover on it and use markers. Oh, that was very exciting. Markers in
Oh
kindergarten
man.
on the front
Yep.
marker was a big deal, and it's all invented spelling. So, Busch Gardens, the name of one little girl's book was Busch Gardens, had a B and a G and an S. Busch Gardens. That was
Yep.
it.
Hey,
And it was perfect,
beginning. That's
Um,
awesome.
yeah. So I do little things like that to make each one feel special, but I'm a very hands-on kind of teacher. That's actually, Sarah, been hard for me with the whole coronavirus thing, is that
Oh,
we
I
were
bet.
told, don't hug them, don't let them
Right.
get near you. I'm like, how do I do my job and
Right.
not? They're coming to me. They've never met me at the beginning of the school year, August.
Sure.
I have a mask on. They
Yeah.
can't see my face or my facial expressions, and I'm not allowed to hug them or touch them.
Yeah.
And I finally, after like a few days, I went to my principal and I said, I want you to know I'm going to be touching the kids
Yeah.
because that's
It's
who I
so
am.
hard.
And
Yeah.
I will take on the responsibility if I get sick. But I feel like every child needs to be touched in some way.
Yeah.
Of course, I was being safe about it. We all had our masks on, and I'm not like
Right.
all up in the kid's face,
Right.
but a touch on the shoulder or a touch on the arm, kids
Right.
need touch.
Yeah.
And that's part of who I am. So,
Yeah.
yep. So I continue to make them feel special in that way too.
Yeah. I love that. And having it built in, I think so smart. And I, from all parents, just appreciate all teachers, especially right now. I just can't even, I think back to when I taught and I'm like, and I didn't teach little kids. So I can't even imagine how hard that all must have been. And trying to adapt and not really fully seeing it coming and not knowing how long it would last. We still don't know. But now, just kind of maybe reflecting on your time before you had a son and you were a teacher then compared to now after and being a mom and working, what would you say are the best benefits of your job as a mom now? Like, what are some of the great things about teaching? I know there's a lot that we know, but are there any extra things that maybe even surprised you that would be benefits? I know right now maybe it's a little different, but in general with teaching, how has that blessed your life as a mom, I guess?
In so many ways. First, to compare the two, remember that when I was teaching before, I wasn't married. I was
Right.
single. So I had so much time, money to pour
Yeah.
into just teaching. I was
Right.
up in my classroom on the weekends, late at
Oh
night.
man.
I spent all my own money. That was like my life. And then I,
Right.
had to take a moment and be like, all right, you've always wanted to get married and have a baby. You better like get your
Right. Clock
priorities
is
straight.
ticking. Yes.
Seriously. So it's hard to compare
Sure.
before kids and after kids because my life is vastly different.
Right.
But one of the ways that I feel blessed is that all of those little things that happen at school that you always wonder, oh, I wish I could have been there. Or I would have
Right.
loved to have been a fly on the wall. I get to do that,
That's
Sarah. I
awesome.
get to
Yeah.
be there for all of the assemblies. I get to peek through the blinds in my classroom and watch him playing with his friends. I
Oh,
get
that's
to
so
take
cute.
pictures of him I'm from Tampa. So Tampa Bucks were just in the Super
Sure.
Bowl, and we had a big to do out on the field where the kids were doing all these different like football drills, and they wore their Bucks shirts to school. I'm
Cute.
out there snapping pictures, right?
Right.
All of those little things that other moms weren't able to be there, of course, because
Right.
no parents are on campus right
Right.
now.
Right. That makes sense.
But I get to be there for all of that. So going back to working full time, remember when I said it had to be like the perfect situation for
Right.
family? I wouldn't go back to teach, probably just to teach and then send my child to another school and have him be in childcare afterwards. I would want
Sure.
to be at the school with him, right?
Right. That
So
makes sense.
whatever school he was at is where I would want to be. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. And then what would you say are just some of the struggles that you've faced? I know obviously the pandemic and just kind of getting thrown in at the last minute, you weren't really expecting to go back. But what other struggles have you faced now as a mom being a teacher?
Well, as my son gets older, just like when I said I went out and snapped pictures of him playing football at
Mhm.
9.5, he doesn't want mom hovering,
Sure. Yeah.
right? So there's a new transition.
Mhm.
As a parent, he loves that I'm there, but I don't need to be so there. Does
Right.
that make sense?
Yes.
So, like the other day, I took my lunch outside. I wanted to just get some fresh air. And one of the beauties of being in Florida is that this time of
Yeah.
year is beautiful. And so
Awesome.
I took my
Jealous.
lunch outside and I just kind of hid behind a tree because I knew it was during his recess time.
Okay.
And I didn't want him to have to come say hi to mom, have to
Right.
come, see what I was doing. I wanted to be able to be outside and him, if he wanted to, come say hi. And if he
Right.
didn't want to, he didn't have to. But I got to hear him playing. What he was playing like Imposters or something. I don't know. There's some
Cute.
video game, and he created it, and he and his friends
Oh,
were
I
playing it on the
love that.
playground. So I got to hear him play, but he didn't feel like mom was hovering and taking pictures of me with my friends, right? So then at the tail end, when his teacher called them in for lunch, because at our school they do recess first, and then they go eat lunch.
Okay.
Um, I stood up and I said, Gabriel, mom. And then he came over and said, why didn't you
Oh.
tell me you were out here? But
Cute.
he's at that age now where I have to let him have time with his friends as if mom were not working at his school.
Right.
You know what I'm
Right.
saying? He needs to have
Yep.
not distance. What am I trying to say? He needs to like have a little bit of independence. Like,
Yeah.
this is who I am at school with my
Right.
friends. They can be a little bit different at home
Right.
with mom and dad, especially just
Sure.
an only child with parents
Right.
who are a little bit, older.
Yeah.
Older. I'm not like old, but
No, I know. Yeah.
I'm gonna be 49 next week.
Oh man. Well, happy birthday.
Thanks. So that's what I mean by like older.
Yeah.
I was almost 40 when I had him. So,
Right.
um, yeah. So, kids are a little bit different. And I want him to be able to, do and say things around his friends without a filter.
Right. And not feel like mom's constantly watching. Yeah. No,
And so
I
I
get
would
that.
say that right now is my struggle as
Right.
far as
Working at his
working
school.
at his
Yeah.
school. Mhm.
Oh, I not ready for those ages. I'm like my daughter oldest just turned 6 and she's like that prime age like you were talking about like I just love talking to her cuz she understands so like having a baby compared to when she was 2.5 and I had our second daughter compared to now when she was 5.5, like she understood way more than I had
Mhm.
anticipated. And it's that whole journey was so cool. And I, like you said, I wish I could be at kindergarten with her, just watching her, because that's something for me that's been really hard of being with her whole upbringing. Maybe talk about that a little bit. How was that as a teacher? And then sending your son off to kindergarten and you're no longer the one teaching him all the time. Was that
Mhm.
hard or was it freeing or how did that feel?
Well, Sarah, I've had him in some sort of program since he was
Okay.
2,
Okay.
because he's a very, very social child and he's an only
Okay.
child. So
Sure.
I knew academically I could pick up
Yeah.
the pieces. I wanted him somewhere where he could blossom socially.
Sure.
So when he was 2, I had him like in a little mommy's day out program at a little church, school. And it
Mhm.
was like an hour and a half or 2 hours twice a week, right?
Sure.
Just barely enough time to be away from me, have to listen
Right.
and follow directions from another,
Yep.
teacher. And then that turned into then when he was 3, he went 3 mornings a week. And then by the
Okay.
time he was 4, he went 5 mornings a week. And then
Okay.
kindergarten was all day, every day.
Okay. Gotcha.
So he's had a little taste of that
Sure.
all along. I purposely
Yep.
chose what I chose so that he was always used to oh, this is school. I put on my backpack and I go to school
Right.
and I
Yeah.
listen to another teacher, and then my mom picks me up. So I started when he was young enough that he understood mom drops me off and it's okay.
Right.
She comes back every day and picks me
Yep.
up. So that it wasn't
So it
such
wasn't a huge adjustment. Yeah. And
because
I actually did that too with my oldest. And
Mhm.
part of my thing too with her was because I was doing daycare. So she was sharing me with all these kids. And that was way harder for her than I had ever anticipated. So that her going to school was a big break for her of it's a neutral place. Everybody's sharing everything. Nothing is mine or theirs. It's the teachers, and so that was really helpful for her. And I totally agree with the social aspect and having to listen to somebody else and learning, oh, my mom's not the only one who makes me wash my hands after I go to the bathroom or, they realize, oh, okay,
yeah.
there are other
And
adults that have rules in the
Mhm.
world.
And just like what I said before, where your kid, their personality is a little bit different at
Oh,
school
yeah,
than it is at
totally.
home. And so she gets to shine in a way
Yes.
at school that she wouldn't be able to at home.
Yeah.
She gets to interact with her friends in a different way
Right.
that she wouldn't be able to at home. She gets to make
Yeah.
mistakes at
Yes.
school that you would be right on top of her. Like
Right.
at home, you'd be like, you need to
Yeah, that's
share those toys, right?
right.
But at school, she's learning that lesson in a different way.
Right. That's so
Yeah.
true. Yeah.
Mhm.
I love that about teachers too. Most teachers, I appreciate when they realize like the kid that comes to school isn't always the kid we see. And sometimes that means the kid at home is a perfect angel and the kid at school tries things out. Whereas in my house, it's the kid who tries things out at home is the perfect angel at school. And it's nice to hear those compliments and things, but I'm always like, wait, who are we talking about? It's just, I just appreciate when teachers understand, like, they get, like you said, kind of a different version of their child. And I appreciate hearing, both sides of it if
Mhm.
they're acting up, and knowing that maybe that's not because we're bad parents. It's just they're
Mhm.
trying things out. They're little. That's what they do. They're trying to figure out what the rules are and what the boundaries are.
And especially
Um,
with your daughter, she is really going to be testing because she's always been right under your thumb. And
right,
she's not right now.
right,
So she may be testing waters in a different way. Like, this really, ticked off my mom, but at school, my teacher doesn't seem to mind it so
right,
much if water spills
right,
on the floor or whatever it is,
right. Yeah,
Um, yeah. So
yeah,
I
and
applaud you for doing that, for encouraging her, even though you had the opportunity to keep her home. You had the
right,
perfect, little school setup down in your basement or
right.
whatever. But letting her go and do that, it really is the best thing for like the whole child.
Yeah, I agree. And for both my two older girls, like I started to see behaviors that hadn't, I was just like, where is this coming? Like they were showing me that daycare was really hard. And I think a lot of people who do daycare don't anticipate that, but anybody will tell you that it's like if your son was in your class, it's such a different experience than if you're just with your kids. They're all of a sudden trying to do whatever they can to get your attention. Sometimes some kids are just totally cool with it. My second born is a lot more go with the flow, like just loves people. But my firstborn, it was like, what can I do to get mom's attention? And that's where I was like, okay, maybe we need some neutral space and a different adult. And she's just shine. And I'm so grateful that I did that. And I'm
Yay.
grateful for you sharing that, stay at home moms, there's no shame in having your kid go anywhere, for a couple hours to make new friends, to have new experiences, even if it's just for you to get away for a little bit and do something of your own. Like, I think there's no shame in doing what you have to do as a
Honestly,
mom.
Sarah, not even that there's no shame in it. I actually applaud you. Like, it's
Yeah,
a
there
good
you go.
thing. You're from a teacher's perspective, the fact that you are setting them up for success for their future of their education
Right,
career. You're teaching them from a very early age. You go to school, you sit and you listen, you learn these skills, and then mommy's there to pick you up when we get
right,
to share it all with me. So,
right.
no, I think it's a good thing. I think it makes for a well-rounded child. They're going to learn things from a teacher that they're not going to learn from you, because maybe you loved doing arts and crafts, but you really didn't like to do science experiments. But the teacher at school loves to do science experiments. So, they're going to learn something different at school than they would at home. And I think that's great that you.
Mm-hmm. And I've heard this quote, and I want to get your take on it, but there's been that quote going around, like, I don't know the exact quote, but I'm trying to think of what it is, but basically, like, a teacher can teach them their ABCs. A teacher can teach them their 1, 2, 3s, their shapes, but they need that they need that, like, self-regulation skills. Have you experienced that as a teacher, that self-regulation is more important than the actual academics coming into kindergarten, or what are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of what I do is all that prep work, I should say, for going to kindergarten, because kindergarten now is very academic. So what we do is all of that stuff to get them ready for going. So we focus a lot on social emotional skills, on communication. A lot of that is hugely important. Now, at the age that I teach, they're not so much like choosing their best friend. And sometimes when you have a best friend, there's little squabbles. They're playing with anybody and everybody, and we're really working on playing with everyone and including everyone in our play. But yeah, I mean, it's really important. And the hard part right now is that there's this very strange, because of the masks, there's this very strange, like, distance that I never saw before, because parents are very, very concerned. The kids are not so concerned. They're very used to it now. But there are times when I'm teaching and I want them to see my face, and I go all the way on the other side of the classroom and pull my mask down for just a second and put it back up. So, yeah, there are times, especially when I'm trying to teach them to hear sounds in words.
Sure.
I have one of those voices,
how you make the sounds.
That I can project. So I literally do. I go on the opposite end of the classroom, big, long, huge classroom. And I use my big, those vocal cords from being a cheerleader all those years ago. And I I busted out across the classroom, because I found that with a mask on, they can't hear the difference between f and s. They have no idea if you said fox or socks. I don't know. Miss Jessica, I don't know. True. So there are times, and this may not be very popular with some of the people listening, that a teacher went across the other side of the classroom and pulled it down for a minute to say f and put my mask back up. But
you got to do what you got to do,
because I know what the kids need, It's a strange time navigating this world right now for the littles with the pandemic. There's a lot that being an early childhood educator, we're being asked to do things that are so opposite of what we know is best practice, that it's hard navigating that when you've taught one way for so many years. I think maybe it would be different if I was brand new, fresh out of college teacher. But when you've been teaching almost 18 years, I think it's 18 years, it's hard. Some of those practices that are best practice are hard to not do right now, to try to teach reading with a mask on. It's hard. It's very hard.
And the kids having masks too, and like trying to understand what they're saying when it's already sometimes, especially when you're, as a daycare provider, I would learn all their little ways of speaking. And so other parents would come in and have no clue what one of the kids was saying at age 2. And I'm like, oh, they just said the United States president is Joe Biden, or what, whatever. Like, they're like, what? So I'm sure at the beginning of the year too, you're like, you can't see what they're saying and you can't always hear what they're saying. So that's a whole other struggle. And the kids can't understand what each other are saying. And I didn't even think about that with my daughter because they're in masks all the time. And I know her teacher was wearing just a shield. But I think they ended up having to switch because she's like, I can't teach kindergarten with my mouth covered. Like you said, she's a very experienced teacher. And she's like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And she's done amazing because they're doing amazing in the transition to distance learning. I was just so impressed. But I'm in some ways that might be easier because you can actually not have a mask on, in some ways. But
no, we weren't even at my school. We weren't even allowed to use the shield. We could only use the mask. And at the beginning of the year, everything was very, very strict, right?
Yeah.
Now, as we're moving into spring, Florida is open, so some of the I don't want to say fear, but some of the big concern is not as like on us as it was before.
Right.
I was not putting my mask down for anything back in August, September. But now, we're almost March. Me to do a little peek to let them see the sounds that I'm making from across the classroom. Like literally at the other end of the classroom. But like you said, like not being able to understand some of the kids, sometimes I'd have to look at my assistant and say, what did she say? I can't understand what she said. And you feel bad. You're like, sweetheart, can you repeat that? Tell Miss Jessica one more time.
Yeah, like you can't hear anything. And some of them have, their own way of saying words. And it's hard especially when you don't know them yet. Okay, I would love to talk to you for 3 more hours, but can't keep you forever. But I would love to know, especially since you are and have been such a great homemaker and just such a bubbly light, what would you say is a survival tip you could pass on to other moms that's just really helped you in some way?
I think, when I said letting go of some stuff, one of the things that I let go of that was hard for me to let go of, surprisingly, when I went back to work was grocery shopping. My husband introduced me to ordering groceries before the pandemic, right? I was doing several years ago. I put Instacart, the app, on my phone and order my groceries every Sunday and pick them up after school.
So you were like an early adopter to all this.
I started doing it because my husband was like, that's such an easy thing. You can pick all the groceries. Let somebody else. I mean, because I was saying, I don't have time for everything. I can't get everything done. He was basically saying, this is something you can take off your plate.
Right.
I don't know why I felt like I need to go and touch the avocados, make sure they're the perfect ripeness for me.
Right.
Yes, I get avocados that are brown sometimes.
Yeah.
Or the bananas that were green.
An hour at least every week.
My sanity, just that time for me back to do with whatever I wanted. I can pick all the produce. I can pick it all. Let somebody else shop for it.
Yeah.
So I gave that up years ago. I haven't, this whole pandemic, that was like a blip on the radar for me with that whole transition where people were freaking out that they couldn't go grocery shopping. I haven't done it for years.
That's awesome. Yeah. I started probably 2019 doing the pickup just because I was like, bringing the kids in and dealing with all that. And I was working 50 hours a week. And I'm like, I don't want to do this on a Saturday. I want to just go pick it up and we'll go have like a excursion because my husband usually was working. So, when everything opens back up one day, it's still a great thing. Like, I hope people keep doing it because it really does. It saves you so much time. And then because time and money, you're either trading one or the other.
Right.
And we only get so much time with our kids. And when you're working, you only get so much time where you're not working. And do you really want to be touching avocados for an hour every week?
Don't.
And it's worth some of the sacrifice. I know some people love it. And if that's your me time, go for it. But there are other things that you might want to take off your list. I love that. And then what would you say is something that you would give your mom a seal of approval? Something that, you purchased, or an app you use, or a service that has made your life easier in some way or better as a mom that you think would benefit other moms?
I order all of my makeup online. I used 100% pure. When I transitioned from like the drugstore makeup, and I realized how much stuff was in it, and as I was aging, I thought it's time to slowly transition. And I found this company, and I love it. It's all made with berries and natural stuff. And
it's called 100% pure.
Like the number 100.
Okay.
The word percent pure.com.
Okay.
And that's the makeup that I'm wearing today. 100% pure, like blueberries on your mascara. And it's really, and it smells good. When you smell it smells really yummy.
You can eat it.
Yeah, you literally could.
You probably could.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The kids could play with it.
Yeah, it's not cheap, Sarah. So you'll have to start a little bit at a time. Like just start with a mask. I started with like eyes and lips because I felt like those two places, like going into your eyes and you're ingesting it. Those were the two things that
that's true.
I think that's where I'll start, with mascara and lipstick. Now we hardly wear lipstick. I was so happy today to be able to.
Yeah, no, your lips look great.
But that used to be like my signature thing, right? I always wore a bold lip, and then now, because you got a mask on.
Well, Jessica, thank you so much for spending so much time with me today. I have loved hearing about your journey from teacher to stay-at-home mom back to teaching, and how you've navigated everything. And it's just so fun to follow you online. So I will have a link to all of Jessica's YouTube and Instagram in the show notes. But thank you so much for being here and just sharing some of your light with us today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me, Sarah.
Oh my goodness. I just loved hearing back this interview after doing it the first time. She is just such a light. That's all I can think of to describe her. I would love if you guys would follow her on Instagram and YouTube. She's not as active on YouTube anymore because she works so hard doing her full-time job and being a mom. But, it's worth subscribing just in case, and you can go back and dive into the archives and just see all the goodness that she has offered and put out there for other moms of young kids to just enjoy and learn from. I just want to say thank you so much to Jessica for doing this podcast episode with me. I had such a great time. If you guys are interested in being interviewed, you have a message you want to share, you have an interesting situation with your job, or maybe you homeschool and work at home, or, there's so many different jobs out there. If you have a unique perspective that I haven't really explored here on the podcast, which I'm sure you do because this podcast is still relatively new, please go to worklifeglue.com/podcast/apply, and there's a form that you can fill out. And I know a lot of you guys have filled out that form, and trust me, I've seen them all, and I will eventually, reach out to those who have filled it out that are a good fit, and I've already reached out to some. But if I don't contact you, it does not mean that your story isn't amazing or that, I wouldn't love to interview you. It just means maybe I got a lot of submissions with the same kind of job, or it just, there's other ones that I want to get to first, or that kind of thing. But I do receive them all, and I appreciate everybody for filling that out. And I just absolutely love having these stories and being able to share my platform with other amazing moms out there. So thank you guys so much for listening. Make sure you come back next week for another episode. And as always, go get something done. Go love on your kids. Go live your dreams. I'll talk to you soon.